So the big question is, will Donald Trump end corporate welfare once and for all, or will big government Republicans stop him? Yesterday, the CEO of Delta saying that he's pumped up about the Trump administration because it might end the government's Export-Import Bank, which, if you don't understand how that works, they actually give cheap loans to Delta's foreign competitors so they could buy Boeing airplanes. In fact, this morning, word out of SpiceJet of India, they're going to buy 100 Boeing planes. But here's the thing. Back in 2015, it was a Republican Congress that voted to keep the bank alive. Joining me now, David McIntosh and Christopher Koopman. David, it felt like at one point the Club for Growth was pro-Exim Bank. Where are you guys now with respect to that?
Yeah, we're very much against it because you pointed out, Charles, it's crony capitalism that is, in this case, hurting American companies because American taxpayers are subsidizing their overseas competitors. Why should the taxpayers pay to help subsidize financing? There's plenty of it in the marketplace. Big companies like Boeing and General Electric can finance their projects. They don't need the taxpayers to help them out.
Here's the thing, though, Chris. When the Republicans pushed it through again, this is what they said. They said Exim Bank supported 164,000 American jobs and 3,300 corporations. You had folks like Chris Collins, Representative Chris Collins, the first Republican to back Donald Trump in his race, who voted for it. He was adamant about this. We reached out to him. Maybe we'll get him on next week. But how are these same Republicans, Chris, going to say, we should get rid of it now?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point here, is that you've had vocal opposition to this for a number of years by Republicans, but now that you have the Republican administration, it's a real test for these congressmen as to whether or not they're going to stand on principle and do the right thing, or now use the Exim Bank for their own political benefit.
I mean, isn't that essentially what it's always been about? And the guys, by the way, David, that they help small businesses. That's just such a small, tiny fraction of the loans that they back. But I think we want to see the playing field leveled. It's nuts. It's crazy for our government to pay for airplanes so that someone in a foreign country can compete against our airlines.
I'll tell you, my hero right now on this is Senator Shelby, who held up the confirmation of the board. And so that means they can't do the big loans to Boeing and GE until they fill that board. I hope that Senator Shelby will hold tough and say to President Trump, you don't need this board either. The taxpayers shouldn't be putting out hundreds of millions of dollars to corporate welfare to these guys.
Yeah, when you talk about draining the swamp, there's the creatures that live in the swamp, and then it's this murky stuff that is the Exim Bank. This is what creates the swamp. This is what keeps it alive. This is the key part, Chris, of its ecosystem. Another part, though, and the CEO of Delta talked about it yesterday as well, these foreign countries who are subsidizing competitors, the Emirates Air, for instance, in Qatar, $42 billion in subsidies. How can our airlines compete against them?
Look, I think the real point here is that if we want to combat these foreign subsidies, we have to lead by example. It seems really disingenuous for an administration to go after foreign countries for doing this when we continue to subsidize favored industries or particular businesses on our own. And I think before we go after these abroad, we really ought to root this out at home.
Well, do you sense that's going to happen with the new administration?
I think there's a really good opportunity here. You have an incoming administration that's made tax and regulatory reform an agenda item, and a Congress that seems willing and able to do it. The real question is whether or not they're going to roll up their sleeves and do the hard work that all businesses, big and small, are able to be encouraged like Ed Bastian is, or whether or not we'll continue to see programs that just simply benefit a favored industry or a particular business that seems to be a campaign contributor at the time.
David, you know these people very, very well. Ultimately, they get to D.C., and I'm not sure how you were able to get there and not be so seduced that you left. But they get there, they're so seduced, and power begets corruption. Is the Republican Party, particularly big government Republicans, are they really going to be able to step up to the plate and not bring a bridge to nowhere back home so they can be reelected?
It's going to be a big test. I'll tell you, for me, I was blessed to have a great wife who made me take out the garbage 2 or 3 times every time I started getting enamored with D.C. But for the rest of these guys, we're going to have let the voters know what they're doing and keep their feet to the fire. That's one of the things the club does. We do a voter alert when they say one thing at home and then start caving into the pressures of the swamp to spend more other people's money.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to keep the heat on them.
All right, gentlemen, thank you both very much. Have a great weekend.